I hear a very gentle sound. With your ear down to the ground. We want the world and we want it. We want the world and we want it. Now.
The 60s were over, and it hadn't gone so well in the end. Vietnam had escalated into a war that wasn't called a war. 4 students were massacred by the National Guard at Kent State. The Beatles, the main musical vibe of the 60s, had broken up. Jimi Hendrix had died. Janis Joplin had died. It wasn't the best of times. I was a student at the University of Texas and was balking at graduating because the next step off campus was Vietnam. I lived with my 2 buddies, Bob and Ashley, better known as Iguana and Statch, and together we called ourselves the Psychiatric Trio. Ashley bought every single record that came out. I always had the stereo, and together we made a pretty good set of roommates. One day, coming back from Hippie Hollow, we stopped at our favorite little bootleg record store, Phil's Records on 24th Street. Phil mentioned that he and his wife Glenna were moving back to New York, and like a bolt of lightning out of the sky, I knew instantly what I was going to be doing in the next phase of my life. He wanted $3,000 for his inventory and a few fixtures, and I negotiated him all the way down to $2,900. And borrowing the cash value from a life insurance policy, I bought it.
Hope you guess my name. But what's puzzling you is the nature of my game.
On August 28, 1970, at 9 o'clock at night, we finished putting the store together. Our original hours were going to be noon to midnight to match the sleep cycles of our soon-to-be customers. I said we still had 3 hours of business that day, and we opened the doors on Inner Sanctum and turned up the stereo with Pink Floyd's Grantchester Meadows. That night, in 3 hours, we sold $143 worth of records. And I thought, damn, this is going to make it.
Misty morning whisperings and gentle stirring sounds belie the deathly silence that lay all around. Hear the lark and hearken to the barking of the dog fox gone to ground. See the splashing of the kingfisher flashing to the water, and a river of green is sliding unseen beneath the trees, laughing as it passes through the endless...
We were pretty groovy Tuesday in those days, too. Bill Bentley said we were the first record shop in Austin that didn't feel like it was owned by the man. We actually billed ourselves as a non-burn record shop in our early ads, and we always pushed the envelope a little. One of our earliest ads, Who is the Real Discount Records, a direct dig at Discount Records on the Drag, said that during our record sale we would be open all day Saturday till midnight, except during the march. This was a huge protest march against the Vietnam War and Nixon's secret B-52 bombing campaign in Cambodia and the Kent State Massacre. It was huge. 50,000 people filled Guadalupe Street from the university all the way downtown. This was at a time when the UT's enrollment was just 40,000.
Before I worked for Inner Sanctum, I worked for Discount Records, which was at 2310 Guadalupe, and we were owned by CBS, a major player in the record business. And one of the first box sets that ever came out of multiple discs for any artist was George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. And unfortunately, when we ordered the All Things Could Pass, we didn't get our full allotment, and Inner Sanctum, who may have ordered fewer than us, still had an adequate supply when we sold out, and we had a big ad for it. We offered a rain check, And I looked out the door, and there was the proprietor of Inner Sanctum with a handful of records, selling them in front of Discount Records on the sidewalk. And the person I worked for was named Bob Packwood. He was about 5'2", and I've never really understood the term blowing your lid. But if his head would have exploded, this was the time. And so we went outside, and I just wanted to see what was going to happen. And he walked up to Joe and said, "This is very bad business. This is very bad." And he was almost beside himself with anger. And Joe just had a laugh on his face, saying, "I'm just selling records on the track."
Being a cowboy.
But the time had come. Inner Sanctum was starting to become successful, and I needed help.
Pursuing the light.
I believe it was sometime in 1972. I don't remember exactly when. I was working at Les Amis. I was working at More Burger first, and I was a customer. Then Les Amis, and of course I was right next door, so I was in the store. I had this period there when I came back to town that I had to buy a record every day. So as a customer, I'd be in there every day. I'd probably just buy maybe a used record, a new record, or whatever. So started out as a customer, and then probably abused you and bugged you and everybody else until you finally had a place for me. Period that I remember, our best two selling records that we had were Jerry Jeff Walker's Viva Terlingua and Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger. Now that, I don't know exactly what the period of years is there, but I know that we sold, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of copies of those two records. So.
My life, easy come, easy go.
Don't cross him, don't boss him. He's wild in his sorrow. He's riding, hiding his pain. Don't fight it, don't spite it. Just wait till.
It wasn't long after I was there that the country started really coming on. That's about the time Willie moved to town. I guess the next year. So yeah, it was country, progressive country, whatever you want to call it, cosmic cowboy country. Willie, of course, was a picnic thing. I went to every picnic for 10 years.
She loves him in spite of his ways. She don't understand. Through teardrops and laughter that pass through this world hand in hand. A good-hearted woman, loving a good-timing man. Anybody going to San Antonio? Phoenix, Arizona. Any place is alright as long as I can forget I never known her.
So one night, Bryson was complaining about not being able to go to the Alice Cooper concert in San Antonio, and I was in there browsing through records, and he said, "Hey, do you want to work?" He'd known me for maybe 2 weeks. I said, "Sure, what do I have to do?" So 10 minutes later, he's out the door, driving to San Antonio, leaving the store in the keeping of a 16-year-old who he'd met 2 weeks earlier. And I remember that I got 2 records for doing that. I got Van Morrison's Astral Weeks and The Mothers Live at the Fillmore. And they weren't even new, they were rental copies. Dinosaurs walked the earth in those days. But every single trend that you see today was started back then. You had great stuff, you had Roxy Music, David Bowie, Noy, Amon Duel. Steely Dan put out their first record, I believe, that year. It was good stuff.
In the morning you go gunning for the man who stole your water, and you fight till he is done, but they catch you.
In 1972, I was obsessed with David Bowie, and I was on a one-man mission to convince Austin that David Bowie was the next best, greatest thing. In the absence of the Beatles, that David Bowie was going to be it, and I think there were about 4 people that agreed with me in the whole city.
Ziggy played guitar, jamming good with Weird and Gilly and the Spiders from Mars. They played it left hand.
It was mostly Michael Murphy and Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, and the whole Cosmic Cowboy thing was raging, and the Armadillo World Headquarters was going, and Willie Nelson was going to have his first, the next year he would have his first 4th of July picnic. So all of that was really what was going on in Austin. It dominated everything. You had the usual rockers, but this cosmic country thing was dominating everything.
It was 1974, and Inner Sanctum was just getting more and more popular. We were busting at the seams in its original 500 square foot location to the left of the door as you entered 504 West 24th, and it was time to expand. We moved the main store across the hall to the space overlooking Les Amis Sidewalk Cafe. Great exposure. Everyone sitting outside at Les Amis could look right into the store and see everyone shopping for records. We needed more records, more cabinets. We had to build it, and build it we did, all together.
Trying to keep her out of sight. Sneaking Sally through the alley. When up pops the wife, I said I can't find nothing wrong with being friends, 'cause sometimes she lets me use the car. She said if you can't find nothing wrong with your mind, you better find something wrong with her. So I began to try to explain that it just wasn't what you thought. I better find something to do with my time. The fact is, just been caught.
Decided that it could be a great classical music store, so we opened it up in the space where the old Inner Sanctum had been at one time. It was kind of a small space, and I absolutely ordered every classical record that was ever made. And we tried to stuff it into one little tiny room, and I'm sure it cost, I don't know, $2 or $3 million. But anyway, poor Joe had, the first time he got the billing at the end of 90 days, he almost had a heart attack. Oh, there was a beautiful mural in the classical record store, very ornate, kind of sort of this New Age, Middle Earth sort of, art. It took them, a month to paint it. It was really, really a beautiful thing. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it sort of created a completely different atmosphere from the other store because it was, it was a nice environment. It really was completely an Austin institution, and it catered to an Austin audience, and it was just different, and the people were very responsive to that too. I mean, it was at one point extremely successful.
Well, Joe started this store when he was still in college, a business major. It wasn't like it was, a lab project from the business school. He just went out and said, I don't need the degree yet, I'm just going to start a business. So I think if Kosmeski had realized that you could start a business and be successful without a computer, that was what business was all about, interaction with people and doing something you love to do and, being part of the community. So it was a true experiment in business acumen, and if the business school had had a sense, they would have said, hey, look, this is a real example of somebody's entrepreneurship in our community. Well, I was heavily into Roxy music and English pub rock at Graham Parker and Elvis Costello and Brinsley Sports and people, Dave Edmonds, people I'd met and knew, Nick Lowe, and the people that eventually all came to Inner Sanctum.
I tried, but I could not find it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes. But where it's going, no one knows. And so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes, and so it goes. But where it's going, no one knows.
You went away and left me long time ago. Now you're knocking on my door. I hear you knocking, but you can't come in.
Just before punk rock became predominant, and it was sort of in between the glam rock of Bowie and Roxy music and stuff, but it was just a transitional period, which, you know, Inner Sanctum sort of touched all the bases of progressive country and rock and folk and everything else. It was all things to all people.
It was like I was talking about before about how we kind of had it covered, you know. We had a country guy, and we for a while when George was there, we even had a mainstream rock guy, and we had a jazz guy, and we had, you know, so we kind of had the bases covered. And then I guess you could say Neil and of course Richard were the punk fans. So I let them, you know, if somebody's got the knowledge, you let them run with it, you know, until the budget runs out.
Richard was, you know, he was kind of the jazz guy. You know, I always thought Richard had more refined tastes. I mean, James was your, you know, I mean, he played the role. I mean, he was Cowboy. You know, he fit into that progressive country. He was the embodiment of progressive country. And for Richard, I was always kind of the more sophisticated person.
Well, James always let me order stuff if he was uncomfortable with it, if he didn't know about it. For a while, I ordered all of the small label material and the jazz. And then after a while, we opened the classical store, and I restocked all the jazz and classical after the initial order. We were hired because, one, we were enthusiastic, and obviously we knew something about music. I managed to fake my way in, and I'm a quick learner. But Bryson had this effect. Things seemed to coalesce around him. He's what you call in physics a strange attractor, or what the police might call an attractive nuisance. Things just happened around him. People were loyal to him. He was loyal to them. So one of the things I learned when starting this whole project, I was figuring out how many people had actually worked at Inner Sanctum over the years, and I was shocked to find out that it was less than 30 over all those years. People just didn't leave.
But it was very innovative, and we would rent records to people that were sealed, and I think we charged them $1, maybe $1.50, but they would bring them back, and we would reduce the original sale price by 50 cents, put a sticker on it saying that it had been rented out, and I know people to this day that still have those stickers on some of their records they own.
Renting records was genius. It was kind of the idea that you could rent a record, you didn't have to buy it and record it, is much similar to the way you can like download a record from a tracker now on your computer. It was, and the record companies were so angry with us. They were going to pull their ad dollars. They were going to sue us. But it was like, it was great. You could buy the record at a discount price because it had been opened, or you could rent it and tape it.
And I'll tell you what helped a lot. We had really good salespeople. So, you know, I would sit down with these cards, and of course you're right there in the store. So if you think something didn't look right, you'd go check it. But I mean, I liked all of them, but I guess since every time he would come to town, we would pretty much go to dinner, and so it was probably Alan Roller or Pickwick salesperson. You know, because back then they had a lot of pretty big labels. Arista and Mercury and a lot of, you know, before Polygram got going. So, but Paul Robertson, you know, I'd go up and visit him in Dallas and stuff, so we were big buddies. And James, of course, has been always a good friend, James Austin. So those are probably the best. James always went home, though. That was the thing. Everybody else would stay. Even the San Antonio guys would stay because, you know, we'd go out drinking or whatever. Some of them had girlfriends here and stuff, but James always drive back. Even if he had to come back the next day, he never spent the night. Must have been some agreement he had with his wife or something.
It was now 1975, and we were about to celebrate our 5th anniversary. I decided that we were going to celebrate it in style, and we rented the entire Lake Austin lodges and invited about 1,000 people. 2 of the bands that are playing here tonight, Steam Heat and Uranium Savages, also played that party. LBJ's barbecuer came and cooked a 1,000-plate dinner, and we had a cake that had a surprise. After everyone sang happy birthday, electric candles exploded in blast of flashbulbs, and then out comes the Savage, Debbie Savage to be exact. It was a stunning moment as Steam Heat struck up the chords to Cut the Cake. Lone Star Beer's Jerry Retzloff was a great friend of Inner Sanctum's in those days and comped us 15 kegs of beer that night. With 1,000 people, it was gone in an hour and a half. We had stocked the bar, the cool room, anywhere we could keep a beer cold, and still we were about to run out of beer by midnight. People had come by car and boat from across the lake, but one person came in a whirly-bird helicopter and gave rides to people all day long. When we were getting close to running out of beer, I got the guy with the helicopter and George Majeski from Soap Creek Saloon and flew across the lake to get a couple of extra kegs from Soap Creek. By the time we were flying back, the beer was gone and so were a lot of people, but there were still at least 150 die-hard fans still there. As we were landing, I looked through the glass bubble and almost no one was wearing any clothes anymore. These were carefree days, and we were certainly enjoying it. The next day, Townsend Miller, a music critic for the Austin American-Statesman, called it the Party of the Year, and we've always been partial to good parties at Inner Sanctum. My fondest memories of that time involved the retinue around a local group of musicians, comedians, and general roustabouts known as the Schraubenobbers. It was kind of like Austin's own version of the Merry Pranksters. The Hawaiian Prince was their leader, and the Corn Palace parties they threw were legendary. The house band was our Uranium Savages Here Tonight and their Mystic number 709. They sponsored a Valentine's event at the Ritz Theater with Larry Raspberry and the High Steppers playing. The main event of the evening was a Valentine's Sweetheart contest. Hip businesses sponsored their sweethearts. Ours was our sweet Linda from right behind our own counter. It was a great event and a great night. It was 1976, and while the U.S. was celebrating its bicentennial, Inner Sanctum was still growing. We were adding more staff all the time, and we were coming into the peak years of Inner Sanctum.
And we had a lot of women working for us. There were a lot of women that worked in our store, which was another really interesting aspect of the record store itself. A lot of women worked there. It wasn't just a guy place, which put a kind of an interesting spin on the whole idea of having a business. More of Joe was more of an equal opportunity employer before that ever came into like our lexicon.
Inner Sanctum wasn't just a job for any of us. It was more like our home, our family. We did a lot of fun things together. One time we closed the store down between semesters at UT and we all went to the beach. I rented 3 houses side by side down in Port A, and we spent several days there just having fun in the ocean and fishing, going exploring in the Land Cruiser, just having a family vacation together. We worked hard and it was fun, but we were so dedicated to the operation of Inner Sanctum, we just needed a break.
first Warren's the Bond album came out on Elektra, we seldom ever played the same music over and over in the store, but the day that record hit, I was working with Al Regal, who we both fell in love with this record, and we were there for like 8 hours, and we played the record over and over and back to back. And then when we came to the store, we practically twisted their arm and said they had to have this record.
Overheard in Mayfair. You better stay away from him. He'll rip your lungs out, Jim. I'd like to meet his tailor. Werewolves of London.